Hi guys, I'm back again. This is the next lesson that we want to work with. So in this lesson, we'll try and put 3 functions that we'll explain as we go along. So the first function we want to actually work with is a function that we will work with an array. So it's a function that we will pass through an array. Okay, we click on next, we click on finish. Okay, so here's how we do it. We want to create a very basic function, and our function, we'll call it void array pass, like that, where we want to be able to pass our int a in brackets, which will be our array, and we want to be able to put the following variables, which is int I, and then we want to have our loop where our I then displays the values. So we will put a for statement where our for statement gets I is equal to 0, I is less than 5, I iterate. Then we put our curly brackets. We then want to print the contents as follows. So we put a percentage %d, we put a new line, we put a comma, it's a in brackets I, like that. So we do the same for our main, where we have int a in brackets, we put 5. Outside of that, we put int I, and then we also put a for statement, which is exactly like this one. So let's just copy this one and put it there. Okay, we've got exactly the same content. No, this is different. This will be different in that we want our to be equal to I, like that. That's the difference between the two, but the statement still remains exactly the same. We then want to call our array, which is array pass. For our array pass, we want to then pass our function, or rather pass our array A into array pass, so that when we run it, okay, my mistake. I put the wrong set of brackets. Yes, now that should work. So what we are saying here is simply we have created a function called array pass, which has int a, which is an array. We've also got int I, where we then want to loop that and display the contents of this array. We get into our main function again. We do the same thing. We declare an array called a, an integer called I, whereby we want to actually set all the values within our loop to our array. And then when we get to array pass, we are simply just copying what is in array pass and putting it into our function, which is a little bit difficult to see as we do it like this, but I'm sure as we go along with the new projects, you'll be able to understand and maybe ask questions if you have any questions on this particular project. Let's move on to the next project, and this project would want to actually call it swap function. So in this particular project, we want to be able to swap numbers. So we want to be able to work with a function that gets a number from one function, we pass it to the other function, and at the end of that particular scenario, we want to be able to swap the two numbers. So here's how we'll do it. We'll actually do the prototype like we had done before, where we simply put void, we put the name of the function, which is swap, and then we put the values that we want to use in our swap. So the easiest will be x and y. Don't forget to put int y there, and then we can also just copy this and put it below, so that we actually start with our swap function. So in our swap function, we want to be able to do the following. There's an error there, let me just correct it. We want these to be pointers, so we put the asterisk like that. So an asterisk before y and an asterisk before x. The moment we have done that, now we want to now do the whole swapping of the values. So we put int temp is equal to asterisk x, asterisk x is equal to asterisk y, asterisk y is equal to temp. So in essence, what we're doing here is we're just simply swapping our values. So whatever we contain in our x, we want to put it into temp. Whatever we contained in our y, we want to put it into x. Whatever we contained in our temp, we want to put it to y. So in essence, the moment this is complete, each of the numbers have been interchanged. So they are changed from the original location to the new location. So in other words, the value that was in x becomes the value that is in y, and the value that was in y becomes the value that was in x, which is why we need the extra variable temp to be able to store the value before it goes to the next section. So after that, now we need to also do the same in our int main, where we put our variables I and j, which are integers, and we want to be able to put a printf to tell us what we want to enter. So we then state the following: enter value for x, like that. So put a new line. We also do the same for y, but let's first finish this. Scan f. We also want to get the value %d, and we want to get I, which is the first value. So we copy this and paste it, and then just change the values. Although for you guys, I'm sure you would have to type in everything, or copy paste if you can follow along as we're going along. So we've got y. I'm copying the wrong content. It's actually supposed to be I and j. So this is j, this is I, like that. So the moment we've got these, we then now want to call our function swap. And then to be able to swap our values, we want to do the following. We want to say and I and j within this function, and then this then takes us to displaying the values that we would have swapped, or the values that would have changed, which then means we do the following. After swap, okay, x equals %d and y equals %d, like that. And then we still use our values as they were, x and y, so that we can see the swap. If we run it, I did the same thing I did before. Sorry, it's I and j. I keep thinking of x and y. My mistakes. Sorry about that. So we run it. We enter 56, 96. Okay, so it's actually now working. The value I'd entered for I is 56. The value I'd entered for j is 96. But now when we're displaying it, the numbers have been swapped. So our function works. So pretty much what this then means is when we get it right like that, it means our function would have worked the way we were expecting it to work. So then the last function we want to get into is the one called a recursive function. So this is a little bit more complex than all the other functions we have worked with, because it pretty much calls itself and repeats itself in a way. So as it repeats itself, it actually does addition, or it sums the values that we would have gotten. It becomes easier when we actually start working with it. Let's work with our recursive function and do the following. So we've got int sum, and our sum has int n, and this is a function prototype because we have started it there. We now actually want to put our function there, where we put int sum in brackets int n, where we type out the following. If our n is not equal to 0, we want to be able to return n plus sum in brackets n minus 1. Here's where it becomes tricky. We are saying if our n is not equal to 0, so as long as our n is a positive number, we want to always be able to return n plus sum n minus 1, right? Else, if that's not the case, we want to return n like that. So what this then means now is we are checking for a number that is positive. So let's say we actually start with a number like 10. The first instance is we are saying n is equal to 10. So the loop checks whether n is equal to 0. If n is not equal to 0, we then say n. To return n, we say n is equal to n plus sum of n minus 1, which then means we're actually reducing the value of n until we get to the place where n is now equal to 0 and we get our 0. So in other words, we're saying 10, the next value will be 9, the next value will be 8, the next value will be 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. So what we'll actually be doing is we'll be adding all those numbers from 10 to 1, and we'll be adding it, and we get our value. So in other words, the total of that becomes what our n will be, or what our total will be. So let's get into the code where we say int number and result. where the next thing we want to do is printf enter a positive number. Okay. After entering our positive number, we need to get that number. So we put a scanf, and our scanf should give us the following: %d ampersand number. Okay. Then we want to do the following: results equals sum and then number. So we want our result to be passed to our function. So in other words, at this particular point, we are saying we are passing number to function sum, like that. And then this then gives us a result. So in other words, we're then saying we just want to get the final result. So printf will give us the final result, and that final result should be sum equals to %d, and then we put a new line, put a comma, and then we put our results like that. If there are no errors, this should run perfectly. So if I run it, I'll need to enter a positive number. For example, I said 10, and then we are saying the sum of all the numbers between 1 to 10 gives us 55. So if we are to calculate it manually, we should come up with 55. We can also use it for any other number that is not 10. Maybe we can put 20, and our number also increases based on the number we would have put. So that is our passing our function through an array, our swap function, and our recursive function. So I'll see you in the next